The sounds of today don't make me laugh. Synths, fusions, odd time signatures. These bands were doing that decades ago. They were musical time travelers dropping albums that the world really wasn't ready for. Until now, that is. Let's take a trip into the future by going deep into the past. So today it's going to be a deep dive into some seriously underrated music. It was either too experimental, too avant-garde, or just too damn well ahead of its time for the mainstream to appreciate. So get ready for this journey through musical history as we explore warning. These bands were seriously overlooked. Okay then. Alright, first up let's talk about Third Ear Band. Now, if you've never heard of them, you're in for a treat. And this was a British band formed in the late 1960s that was pushing the boundaries of what we think of as progressive rock long before it became a mainstream genre. They mixed up experimental soundscapes with traditional folk music and created something completely unique. Now imagine avant-garde jazz, free from improvisation with a touch of mysticism, all wrapped up in a strange and otherworldly sound. Albums like Self-Titled and Alchemy, released in 1971, were hugely influential for those who were lucky enough to hear them, and they never really made it to the mainstream though. The blend of Eastern rhythms, minimalist drone sounds, and a radical use of unconventional instruments like the sitar and didgeridoo were just seriously ahead of the time. In truth, they were simply almost too strange for that era, and that's probably why they didn't break into the limelight. But trust me, their influence is still felt much today. Now, next I've got Max Webster for you. They're a band that's been heavily suggested by you guys out there, and you might know them as the band that had some minor commercial success in the late 70s. But they really should have been so much bigger than that. Hailing from Canada, Max Webster combined elements of progressive rock, hard rock, and even a little bit of pop, creating a sound that was just incredibly diverse and complex. Now, in their 1979 album, A Million Vacations, it's a perfect example of why this band was just criminally overlooked. The tracks were catchy, but unpredictable, and the sound really oscillated between upbeat rock anthems and more intricate, nuanced pieces that drew from jazz and classical influences. You might have even heard some early Rush vibes in there, which is no surprise, since Geddy Lee actually produced some of their music. Max Webster's quirky style, paired with the eccentric frontman of Kim Mitchell, made them one of the bands that was always on the verge of becoming huge, but never quite crossed over. Their sound was much too adventurous for mainstream radio, but yet too polished for the underground scene. A real case of being stuck between two worlds. Next, Hatfield and the North. Now, this is a band that is often cited by progressive rock connoisseurs as one of the hidden gems of the genre, yet they rarely seem to get any attention, let alone what they deserve. Now, formed by former members of the Canterbury scene, including Robert Wyatt and Richard Sinclair, their sound is a mix of quirky, jazzy and whimsical elements with sharp time signatures and unpredictable melodies. Hatfield and the North released 2 albums. They had their self-titled debut in 1974 and The Rotters Club in 1975, and both of which are packed with utter brilliance. The band's music is a rollercoaster ride of complex arrangements and delightful absurdity. It's playful, experimental, and never really afraid to take unexpected turns. Tracks like the Yes No interlude showcase their ability to make their music feel really fun and accessible, despite the high technical skill levels. But despite of all this, Hatfield and the North were overlooked by the broader public. Their work was too intricate for casual listeners and too whimsical for the die-hard prog fans of the time. Yet their music remains unquestionable and still influences prog rock and jazz fusion today. Now into the Italian prog rock scene this time was Acqua Fragile. Now if you love that sweet, melancholy sound that blends symphonic prog with a sense of yearning, then Acqua Fragile is a band you need to know. Their self-titled debut from 1973 is really a masterpiece of emotional depth and musical complexity. They were led by Francesco Di Giacomo, whose soaring vocals and poetic lyrics were paired with intricate melodies and beautiful keyboards arrangements. Their sound was often compared to early Genesis with a dash of Italian music passion and flair. Tracks like Immagini take you on a journey, weaving a symphonic beauty with hard-edged rock riffs. But despite their stunning musical output, Acqua Fragili struggled to gain any strong following really outside of Italy. They never found the commercial success that they really deserved, leaving them as one of the most overlooked bands in the progressive rock movement. Now known as art punk pioneers, blending poetic lyrics with guitar duels, jazz-like structure and downtown cool, Television really didn't fit easily into any one genre. And that's exactly what made them legendary. They were formed in the early 70s by Tom Verlaine and Richard Hell. The band helped shape the DNA of New York's punk and art rock scenes. They were fixtures at the CBGB during its earliest days, playing alongside the Ramones, Blondie and Talking Heads. But Television stood apart. Their sound was thoughtful, minimalist, and really built around tightly wound guitar interplay that drew more from jazz and the Velvet Underground than from perhaps traditional punk. Their seminal debut, Marquee Moon 1977, is still considered one of the most influential rock albums of all time. Now, clocking in at just over 10 minutes, the title track alone shattered punk's rules, eschewing brevity and aggression for intricate, shimmering guitar work and poetic, cryptic lyrics. Now, where most punk was about speed, Television were about precision. Verlaine and Richard Lloyd's dual guitar chemistry gave the band a layered, really almost orchestral texture without ever sounding bloated. But despite critical acclaim, they never became a commercial force, and their original run was really quite brief. But once again, their legacy rippled through generations. Post-punk, indie rock and alternative bands from R.E.M. to Sonic Youth to The Strokes owed Television a massive debt for proving that punk could be intellectual, melodic and really wildly expressive. Now, another band I'm frequently asked to look at is Amon Düül, whose roots lay in German krautrock, and they were a band that blurred the lines between rock psychedelia and experimental music. Amon Düül 2, in particular, is perhaps the most famous of the two Amon Düül bands, but both deserve recognition. The 1970 album Phallus Day is a wide variety of experimental sound, blending raw, improvised jam sessions, really with a sense of spontaneity and free expression. It's a fascinating combination of freeform rock, political commentary and avant-garde mysticism. You never really know where the track is going to be taking you, and that unpredictability is part of its appeal. Now, unfortunately, Amon Düül's unconventional style, along with quite an anti-establishment leanings, really kept them out of the mainstream spotlight. Still, their impact on the development of progressive and experimental rock is quite undeniable. A worthwhile band to discover and listen to. Now, last but not least, this time around is Solution, who were a Dutch band from the 70s who blended progressive rock with jazz, creating a sound that was really sophisticated but melodic. They released a self-titled album in 1972, and this is a perfect introduction to their particular individual style, complex, intricate, but yet a warm, accessible feel to it. Now, their sound is best described as progressive rock with a jazz fusion influence, but was less of that self-indulgent that often plagues the genre. Their music is driven by tight rhythm sections, lush keyboard arrangements, and impeccable musicianship. It's a sound that appeals to both the head and also the heart. But despite the technical proficiency and infectious melodies, they never quite broke through to the level of recognition that they deserved. The sound wasn't radical enough to be considered groundbreaking, but it was certainly ahead of the curve, and that left them in relative obscurity, unfortunately. So, 7 incredible bands that were seriously overlooked back in the day. Now, whether they were too experimental, too ahead of their time, or just they never caught the right break, these groups all deserve more recognition than they received. Now, if you haven't already, I highly recommend checking out their discographies. I've put a playlist together for some of their best titles, and you can find that link in the description. And there's also an affiliate code in there for a free trial of Amazon Music should you wish. Now, if you like finding out about bands that had been forgotten, I shot a video here about just such a topic. If you're interested, watch this one next, and I'll see you over there.